Minister Kamal Nath, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this public lecture by Minister Kamal Nath, whom we have the great pleasure of hosting a second time in the Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. My name is Kishore Mahbubani. I'm the Dean of the school. And some of you may know that it's a tradition for me to make 3 points when I introduce the speaker. So the first point I'm going to make is, of course, about the school. The good thing about having a celebrity like Minister Kamal Nath come to the school is that we get a new audience and a new captive audience for propaganda about the school. So we don't hesitate to tell the story about why we are the fastest growing school of public policy in the world. We started in 2004 with 50 students from 10 countries. Now we have almost 400 students from 50 countries, from Singapore, China, India, United States of America. And what's unusual about our school also, we are also one of the most generous schools of public policy in the world. More than half of the students who come from overseas come on scholarships given by us as a result of all the generous donations that we have received. And sometimes we make the point to a new crowd. In other schools, you have students chasing scholarships. In our school, sometimes we have scholarships chasing students. So I'm saying all this so that you can go back, especially you, Minister Kamal Nath, will go back and pass the word around and say that please consider the Kuan Yew School of Public Policy if you are looking for a place to go to for your postgraduate education. So I hope you'll pass that message. The second point I was going to make is actually about the topic that he has chosen to speak on, Minister Kamal Nath. And as you know, the big story in Asia is the rapid transformation of Asia, rapid development of Asia, and certainly you'll see the most rapid development in the area of infrastructure. And it's also known that both China and India are going to make massive investments in that area and have made massive investments. When I was trying to do some research, I always had the assumption that China has built more roads than India has. I mean, that's what we all think. But if you check the official statistics, in the 1990, in the latest period, India's road network has grown by 600,000 kilometers from 2.7 to 3.3 million kilometers, whereas China's has only grown by 443,000 kilometers, less than India's, from 1.32 to 1.77 million kilometers. But China's roads, as you know, Minister Kamal Nath, get a lot more attention because they're big highways and everybody films them all the time. But it's clear that India is doing a lot in that area. And everybody's looking to India as the next frontier for infrastructure development. I just found a quote by George Soros, who said this. He said, and I quote, "I think that going forward, since the Indian economy was not as badly damaged as other countries, now I think that the outlook for India is actually better than most other countries, partly because India is more separated due because of its domestic growth. And of course, this is what George Soros says, and there's the tremendous need for infrastructure investment, and therefore an economic stimulus could be very well spent." So this is the topic of the day that Minister Kamal Nath has agreed to address us on today. And of course, the third point is about the speaker. Now, I could normally speak 1 hour about Minister Kamal Nath. He and I actually are good friends. We've met several times in many places, in Davos and elsewhere. And I can tell you that wherever he goes, he's treated as a superstar, gets a tremendous amount of global recognition. That's partly because he's been in politics, we were discussing earlier, for 31 years. He's been re-elected 8 times in the same constituency. Now, in the past, politicians in Singapore did not envy re-election. Now they do. Because we were discussing, Mr. Kamal Nath and I, how things have changed even in Singapore. And so I'm sure you can give the Singapore government a lesson or two of how you win elections 8 times in a row. He's, of course, had many important national positions. He was Minister for Commerce and Industry at a very crucial period from 2004 to 2009. And if any of you had read at that time any news dispatch about WTO, about Cancun, Kamal Nath's name was always page 1 in that story. But he has also been Minister of Road Transport and Highways from May 2009 to January 2011. And that's why he's well suited to speak about the subject, and now Minister of Urban Development since January 2011. So with that very brief introduction, I'm going to invite Minister Kamal Nath to make his presentation, and then hopefully we'll have a dialogue after that here. And he has very kindly and generously agreed to answer questions in all areas, and not just about infrastructure. So if you have a challenging question to him about Indian politics, he'll be happy to take you on. So, my friend Kamal.
Thank you, Kishore, for your very warm introduction. And I'm delighted to be back here in the Lee Kuan School, which is now a repository of knowledge, learning, and research. So, Kishore, you don't have to tell me to send students from India, but you may regret it. You may have too many here. When we talk in India, we talk of numbers and scale. And Singapore, I don't think can deal with the Indian concepts of scale, even in an election. So I'm delighted to be back here and back in Singapore. Singapore, my frequent visits here to this vibrant city is testimony to the growing synergies between Singapore and India and the future trajectories of our two countries, Singapore, which has already unleashed its entrepreneurial and intellectual ability, and India, which is now unleashing its intellectual and entrepreneurial ability. In fact, we are in July of 2011, and it's 20 years since we started our reforms process. I remember coming to Singapore when I was the environment minister and calling on my friend George Yew, meeting with George Yew, and in this region, putting ourselves together for the climate change treaty and the biodiversity treaty. Now, so much has changed in Singapore, and so much has changed in India. It's 20 years almost to the week of India's reforms. It was on the 22nd or 23rd of July of 1991 when our then finance minister and now prime minister put India on the path of reforms. And at that time, there were skeptics. Forget infrastructure, forget urbanization. There were skeptics that India was somersaulting on its Gandhian philosophy, Nehruvian socialistic pattern of society. And there were many within the cabinet and government who felt that this was a sure road to suicide. And in the cabinet, some told the prime minister that, the finance minister and the then prime minister, that India is going to commit suicide. I remember there were very few of us at that time in government who backed this. So 20 years down is a moment of reflection of where we went on our reforms process, because in India, reforms is so complex. As you all know, that India is a very complex country. We are not only the largest democracy, we are the rowdiest democracy. And we elect people for everything, whether it's parliament, whether it's assemblies, in our municipal bodies, in our village councils, our panchayats. India has almost 450,000 elected representatives. Now, that is India's democracy. So in a complex country like India, what is the kind of reforms? I remember thinking last week that there were many challenges. What should we follow? we had the East Asian model. We were seeing Malaysia reform. We were seeing the great liberalization taking place in Thailand. We were seeing a small Singapore, which had emerged. Then there was Central and South America, which had their own models. But for India, there was no model for us to follow. We had to choose our own model. And we chose the model of calibrated reforms in trade and industry, trade and investment. Now, when we reflect back on these 20 years, we see the dramatic changes. When I said India has also started unleashing its intellectual and entrepreneurial potential. And it is then that really started happening, that India started moving, the world started looking at India, not with a lot of confidence, because still people thought that India will fumble along. But today, as we continue to grow, as India continues on its growth trajectory, the challenge is not only sustaining growth, but managing growth. What are the kind of growth which we have to have in India? And in this challenge of managing growth is the challenge of all-inclusive growth, growth not only in urban infrastructure, but in rural infrastructure. Kishore, you mentioned China's great roads. We have great admiration for China's phenomenal urban infrastructure. But if you asked me 20 years ago that what should this financial outlay go on, a highway or on a road in your district, I would want to build the village roads. So in India, we embarked on building village roads in my own district. Now, I come from a district, just to give it as an example, which is 14,000 square kilometers. How many Singapores is it? I have 1.8 million voters. Now, if I ask them we should build a Delhi airport, or should we have drinking water and village roads, they'd say hell to Delhi airport, and I would also say hell to Delhi airport. That's why I would win. If I talked of Delhi airport and knocked off the village. So we moved on. And in our challenge of infrastructure, in our challenge of inclusive growth, that's our challenge in government today. The challenge of all-inclusive growth. How do you make lives, how do you make progress touch the lives of all sections of society in all parts of the country? I remember when we were having this 9% growth, people used to ask me, 80%, 90% of the people were cut off from this. They said, what is this 8 or 9% GDP? What do they call GDP? And does it touch our lives? The Mumbais and the Delhis, the Bangalores, the Chennais, yes, it touched their lives. But did it touch the lives of others? In a country with 300 million people, or less than $1 a day, we are talking about 9% growth in GDP. And of course, we are targeting that today, because the economic activity it generates, at the end of the day, is how much of economic activity can 8 or 9% growth generate in all parts of the country. It'll be generated differently, in different ways. Somewhere it may be a road, somewhere it may be drinking water, somewhere it may be construction, which leads to economic activity, leads to an investment in that area. So when we talk of India's growth story, we must recognize that India has had no bubbles which burst. We didn't even have the financial crisis. You had the East Asian financial crisis many years ago in this part of the world. You saw what happened in South and Central America, and what happened 3 years ago in the Western world. I remember in Davos, Kishore, you mentioned Davos, 3 years ago, 4 years ago in Davos, when I used to stand there and speak about India, a lot of people get up and say, why doesn't India reform? Why doesn't India reform its banking sector? Best practices. And I would sheepishly say, that, well, it's not best practices, India's on to next practices. About banking practices. Well, when I went back in 2009 to Davos, I was telling the same audience that, well, you are where you are and I am where I am, and it's my practices which has led me to where I am. In India, banks are giving money to governments. In your part of the world, in the Western world, government were giving money to banks. That was the big difference. And it is this which makes India different. It is this which makes India look at challenges differently. So when we look at the challenge of infrastructure and urbanization, what do we see? We see in India a huge infrastructure deficit. A huge infrastructure deficit. And when we talk of our big plans, we talk of our big plans, whether it's in roads, whether it's in airports, whether it's in energy, we talk of not building for the future, but catching up with the past. When we talk of urbanization, we talk of urbanization, the challenge of urbanization, where today 60% of our GDP is generated in our urban centers. We talk of urbanization, where there is a young age profile in India, and a young age profile makes mobility very much easier. We have the youngest age profile perhaps in the world. A young population ready to move around, ready to move, relocate, move to urban areas. And that is what makes the challenge of urbanization even more. So when we talk of infrastructure in India, I must say that we are really talking of catching up with the past and not building for the future. We have these enormous programs. We have perhaps one of the largest infrastructure programs in the world. And infrastructure today is really getting to be a buzzword when President Obama talks about a package, a stimulus package for the infrastructure. He's talking about renewal of infrastructure. In the Western world, they're talking about renewal of infrastructure. In India, we are talking about building infrastructure. And that's the big difference. But infrastructure today is undoubtedly, whether it's urban infrastructure or any infrastructure in India, because growth has preceded development. Growth has preceded infrastructure. And with growth preceding infrastructure, our infrastructure deficit only increases. And with a young population, I love saying this, but India has perhaps the largest population of aspirers. We have the largest aspirational society on this planet, with 430 million people in the age group of 18 to 35. With such high aspirations, India, the political challenge in India even becomes more profound, because people are looking for shortcuts to growth, shortcuts to development, and there are no shortcuts to growth and development. So as we move forward with huge plans in our power sector of adding 62,000 megawatts. What is the total generation in Singapore? I wouldn't know. But 62,000 megawatts in the 11th plan, which ends next year, out of which we already have 32,000 on stream. Mega projects, power projects. We have the third largest network of railways run by a single management. We have the oldest, one of the oldest railway networks. Modernization, capacity enhancement, technology upgradation. We have a huge program here. We have in our roads carry 70% of freight traffic and 85% of passenger traffic. Now, whether they are rural roads, there are state roads, or our national highways are only 2%. 2% of our total road network in the country of 3.4 million kilometers. Now, Kishore, you said 3 million. It's 3.4 million kilometers totally in roads, and only 2% are national highways. And this carries 70% this carries 70% of the load. So here again, the challenge is huge, and we got huge programs. We got, and our airports, in our non-metro airports, we are trying for 35 new non-metro, other than these 4 or 5 big cities. Just a week ago, I participated in the inauguration of the Bhopal airport. And then we go on to Nagpur, we go on to other non-metro airports, very large airports, modern airports. Our ports, 12 major ports and 200 minor ports, building up capacity in this. In our major port of about 415 million tons and 345 million tons in our minor ports. Why? Because India's engagement with the global economy is only growing. India's engagement with the global economy is as never before. We in India are not only exporters. India is a large importer. Our imports in India have gone up much more than our exports. India is not merely looking for investment. India is a major investor outside. We created more jobs in the United States by Indian investments in the US than what the United States has created in India. And I'm talking about in the last year, not cumulative. Similarly, India's investments in Australia are much more than Australia's total investments in India. So India not being just an exporter, its engagement with the global economy in terms of export, in terms of investment, is a two-way street. And that means a further stress on our infrastructure. Further stress on our infrastructure, which is again, a new challenge. Our wireless phones constitute 95% of our total, about 770 million telephones. All of you are familiar with India. Remember how long you had to wait? It was the liberalization process, again, 20 years ago. We started this, where it changed the complete landscape. And then we have our urbanization challenge, where I said that in the next decade, today 60% of our GDP is generated in our urban centers. In the next decade, it'll be 70% of our GDP. 70% of new jobs will happen in our urban centers. So we are going to have about 40%, that is about 500 million people living in India's cities and towns, small towns. 500 million people there. So the challenge is not only urbanization, is suburbanization. How do we have planned suburbanization? I'm intrigued, and it's a great study of Singapore, how Singapore has squeezed every ounce of every millimeter of land. What is land economics? What is city planning? In a very smaller scale, the density. What is density management? What is dispersal? What is the challenge of dispersal of cities? In many ways, these are the challenges in India, where we now have about 52 cities with over 1 million population. And these will run up close to 70 with over 1 million population in India. Besides mega cities, we are going to have about 15 cities with more than 4 million. And, of course, our 6 mega cities. So huge stress on movement to urban areas. Urban transport is again another challenge. And here again, in our towns, with the effort of, with our strategy being to move people, not vehicles. When we want to move people and not vehicles, what is the right models? In our metro, when we are entering our 3rd phase of the Delhi Metro, when we complete our final 4th phase of our Delhi Metro, we would have a metro, an underground transportation system in Delhi, which is larger than London's underground. Similarly, our metros in Kolkata, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, and Hyderabad, and Jaipur are in the process of construction. We are looking at many more all towns above 300,000, 400,000 people, sorry, 3 million people, 3 million or 4 million people, to how do we plan metros there? What are the right mode? Is it underground or overhead? Is a monorail better? What is it? New technologies. It is here that we have this great challenge. And as India grows, as India moves on, I think the biggest challenge, even if we talk of equitable growth, of managing growth, it can happen by infrastructure growth. Infrastructure development in rural India, infrastructure development in our northeast, infrastructure development in Jammu and Kashmir are those which are going to generate economic activity, and those which are going to lead to one of our biggest challenges of inclusive growth. So while in India we had India's prowess, we had the great decade of IT, I think now is the decade of infrastructure in India. So thank you, Kishore, for inviting me to be with you, and I'm delighted to be here, back again, in this great repository of knowledge, and your leadership obviously bears the mark of this pronounced change at the Lee Kuan School. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fascinating. And I'm going to take advantage of the moderator's position to ask the first 2 or 3 questions, and then please be ready for more. The first one, I must say I'm glad you mentioned that this is the 20th anniversary, almost to the day, of reforms. And I'm very glad you mentioned the cabinet meeting around that time, when you're having a debate about to reform or not to reform, and the people saying that, hey, this is dangerous, we're giving away the country and all that. What were the opponents saying then now? They're saying then, and how do they feel about it now?
Well, most of those who were there at that time are no more in the government today. Time has moved on.
Unlike you, they don't get re-elected.
But obviously there were concerns. We were talking about getting over with the license Raj.
Yeah.
You know what you want. We are talking about liberalizing imports, where at that time we had one ambassador car and one Fiat car. Yeah. We were talking of completely a different world. And we were talking about reducing our tariffs. There was concern in, I'd say, the majority of the cabinet at that time. Majority. Saying that, we were followed the socialistic pattern of society. Now these foreign companies will come in. Imports will flood our country. There was no challenge that time of Chinese imports, you see. But China was still, what?
Closed, yeah.
10 years into the, no.
10 years,
16 years, yeah, 10 years into the reforms. So that hadn't happened. But there were concerns of the socialistic pattern of society. The questions asked was, what will happen to our public sector? Because growth in India was public sector driven. Growth was not driven by the private sector. And that is the biggest transformation in India, which, if you were to ask me what is the biggest change you see, well, the biggest change is that growth 20 years ago was public sector driven. Today, growth is private sector driven. And growth sometimes takes place with the liberalizations despite government, which is a good thing. And in a country where growth can take place despite government, I
can quote you on that, right?
Yes, you can. It is a fact. I don't think it requires much research. And that is it. So there were concerns, the socialistic pattern, changing our socialistic pattern of society, socialistic pattern of the economy. Yeah. So you remember, we had the Bombay Club. Yeah. There was a club called, which there are many big names which still are the great beneficiaries of liberalization. I joke with them sometimes. Yeah. That they had set up a group of business houses who were used to the license Raj with the protection of licensing. Set up a club called the Bombay Club to oppose it, to oppose liberalization. And, well, now they are great champions of liberalization.
Same club, right?
Yeah, same club.
Well, you know, the other surprising thing you said, by the way, and it's an astonishing fact, is that you said last year, India created more jobs in America than America created jobs in India. That's an amazing shift, isn't it?
That's for the last 2 years. Yeah. It's not only last year, it's even last year, because Indian investments
in America.
In the United States, have created more jobs in the United States for the last 2, maybe 3 years than what the US investments in India have created. So India is creating many more jobs in the United States. In the UK, well, if you see the Tata investments, you see the other investments, you know, the big flagships, Indian investments in the UK are so large. And it bears testimony to the British liberal approach that all the one Indian investment draws in 5 more because they're very comfortable. I had a neighbor who I didn't see for 1.5 years, so I said, what have you done? He said, I bought a company and I bought a factory in the UK, and I'm doing very well.
Wow.
So it's another matter that Indian curry houses in the UK create more jobs than the entire steel and auto sector in the UK.
Now, tell me the most difficult question. How many years before India has a foreign aid program for the UK?
Well, I must say, that's a very old word, foreign aid.
Yeah.
Because there was that time when, it was aid-oriented.
Yeah.
Now, these are called ODAs, Overseas Development Assistance Programs. And these assistance programs really, at times are helping.
Yeah.
The country's concerned program.
Yeah.
It's helping their own institutions.
Yes, I know.
So it's just not aid.
Yeah. It's for fostering your own. Okay, I don't want to monopolize Minister Kamal Nath. Questions? Yes, please come to the mic and identify yourself. And if possible, short, sharp, provocative question. Believe me, he responds very well to challenges.
Mr. Kamal Nath, thanks for coming to Singapore. I come from a city called Gurgaon in India. And the interesting thing is, probably not to the day, but Gurgaon grew in the last 20 years. And as a city, I think it should be what infrastructure and urbanization should not be all about. And when you talk about the big plans and so on and so forth, I'm very interested to know what is the government, and be it at the state level, central level, and there's this whole thing about state subject, central subject, is the government doing in A, learning from what's gone wrong, B, measures where these things or the ills are not repeated in newer towns, and 3, are there similar more pilot projects or cities planned elsewhere in the country, like a Delhi metro, which is kind of now being used as an example to set up all over the country. And so similarly, pilot project cities being set up elsewhere in the country.
Well, what I mentioned a short while ago was suburbanization. Now, Gurgaon was a classic case of suburbanization by default, not by design, right? That is what we are now looking at, that how do we have planned suburbanization? And one of the big constraints, there is the art of the desirable, then there's the art of the feasible. To make the art of the desirable into the art of the feasible, you've got to have capacity. One of our big constraints in our urban local bodies, as all those who are connected with India will know, our municipal corporations and our municipalities. What is our institutional capability there? Very poor. What is the strength of the people? Very poor. Are there town planners? Are there city planners? They're not there. Everybody's coming in. He serves a tenure of 2 or 3 years and goes away. So one of the big challenges is capacity building. How do we train people for our municipalities and municipal corporations? Politically, in our states and elsewhere, it used to be that all those who are discarded are sent to the municipalities. Post him to a municipality. But that was meant to be a dumping ground, right? And, well, the result of that was for all of us to see. We have cities bursting at the seams, carrying capacity. No carrying capacity in the cities, whether sewage, water, parking, everything. So with the development of our satellite cities, there is a program now, our urban programs, where we are funding the states to build up capacity from the central government. We are funding them. And I had constituted a committee of the National Development Council to look into this, in a committee of the National Development Council, to come up with plans of how we are going to have proper skills in our municipalities so that we don't create another Gurgaon. You're absolutely right that Gurgaon is not what we should be proud of. But we are looking at massive suburbanization plans. States are being, for our tier 2 cities, you know, you're looking at Delhi. That's a mega city. Even our city, tier 2 cities, it's a huge problem. You look at a city like Coimbatore. You look like a city like Ludhiana. You look at a city like Bhopal, bursting. So until you are going to have planned suburbanization, and then we are looking at land economics. There is no land economics. I'm setting up strengths in land economics. So the process is on. It's not that we don't see it. We see it, but the magnitude of it, so the scale is so large. So we put that into motion.
Okay, next question, please. Short, sharp question, please. Yeah.
Yes, Sophie from Singapore. I'm very glad, 2 points instead of 3 points. First point is I'm very glad from India you have educated the West, the Anglo-Saxons, that reform is not the words, it's progressing and constructions, because reform belongs to review, retreat, and eventually regret. So it is important to educate the West that we have to look forward, to improve, to refine, to progress. Reform is not the word. First point. Second point is, today, we have the great architecture of Singapore infrastructure here. At those days, we were looking at industrial parks. We built towns, we built parks, so that we have factories near to where you live. We reduce the transportation needs. Today, industrialization is not the key driver. A lot of the work, if you take a flight from India here, most of them are not with Intel, with Microsoft, but most of them are traders, commerce, business, services. Therefore, in building a new town, it is easier to build businesses near where you live. Therefore, may I suggest to reduce the burdens of our infrastructure, our highway. Maybe LKY, SPP can move to Pongo. Then you create a lot of jobs up there and people don't have to travel down. This will same apply to India, because this is what I share with Tianjin Eco-City. First, when they built the Eco-City...
I have to stop you here.
Good.
Please just phrase your question and then stop now, if you don't mind.
Maybe these are 2 points that we can do and we can think about. I need the educations from the minister. Thank you.
Thank you for your suggestions. But, there's really no question you've asked me. But let me try and, what you said as a suggestion, let me try and amplify that. You know, when you talk of manufacturing, Singapore was to have industrial parks. Yes, the world has changed for Singapore also. You're not looking for manufacturing here. But in India, we are. In India, we are looking for manufacturing. Because 1 job in manufacturing creates 3 jobs in services, or 4 jobs in services. With a young population, we've got to look at employment generation program all the time. So we are looking for manufacturing. Now, you're saying that industry should go to infrastructure, should go to where the roads are. The road should not go to where manufacturing is. Am I right?
Is tailor the infrastructure to the new economy.
Absolutely. You're right. Our Delhi-Mumbai industrial corridor, which we are building, that means the infrastructure is being tailored for our industrial corridors. That is what is happening. Again, we've got to look at balanced growth in that. Where trade is concerned, we are now looking at town planning, that where we're going to have the metro, you have intensive commercialization there. That means you get off from your train, you got your mall, you got your office, and you don't have to commute to your office. So we are looking at intensive commercialization of our metro areas, wherever the metro is passing, like in Delhi. That is going to de-stress much of our transportation, urban transportation areas. But I do agree with you that the Western model is not necessarily the right model. But we must also recognize the Western model was in a particular context, was in a world of 50 years ago. Today, much of that has changed. Manufacturing, the hub of manufacturing has moved to East Asia. You're seeing more cars being built outside the United States. All that has changed. And that is what has to be recognized by the Western economies themselves, with higher age populations. If you see the age profile of Germany or Japan, you see much higher age profile. They don't have the workers. So they've got to really strategize differently than what we have to strategize.
Great. Next question, please. I don't see many hands. Huh?
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Vinit, and my question to you is that on the urbanization challenge, India is a democracy, and we always look at China, which is a communist country. And in terms of urbanization, it really interlinks and relates in issues such as being a democracy. India has land acquisition issues, and I think Shashi Tharoor once quoted that in 5 years, China can manage to build a sea bridge, but in India, it takes 20 years to buy that patch of land, because first and foremost, we are the largest democracy. So in that context, what do you see? How does that form a challenge in our urbanization story?
Well, of course, land acquisition is a challenge. We cannot compare ourselves with China. I don't want to do it, because China has its own genius. We have our own genius. Okay, that's the best way I can put it. But
you should become a diplomat.
No, well, land acquisition is a problem. There's urban land acquisition, and there's rural land acquisition. Rural land acquisition is for building a dam, irrigation projects. For infrastructure largely, other than ports and airports, there's no huge chunk of land. If you build a road, you're not taking away 10,000 acres from one man. You're taking 20 feet here and 20 feet there. Similarly, if you're building a railway line, a new railway line, it's not that much. The value of the land goes up, economic activity gets generated. Urban areas, of course, there's a huge challenge, because the value of land is so high. So when I said there's land economics, people oppose land acquisition which is not fair. Up till now, our land acquisition laws have not been fair in India. And I think in the next session of Parliament, we are going to bring in, we are introducing a bill for amending our land acquisition laws. Land acquisition has to be at a fair and equitable price. The compensation must be fair and equitable. If it raises project costs, it raises project costs. Our land acquisition law is that of 1890. That is the big problem. The problem is displacement of people. One is displacement where their housing is going, villages have to move away. There's not only cost involved to it, there are sentiments. He said, I was born here, why should I leave my village? But for big irrigation projects, where you require 10,000 acres of land, or 5,000 or 20,000 acres of land, it does pose a serious problem. But otherwise, no. The opposition is not so much to acquisition per se as much as the process and the compensation.
Thank you. I saw a lady, I think. Please, let's give a lady a chance. Yes.
Hi, I'm Crystal. Thank you very much for what you've shared with us just now. I've got two questions here. The first one is on what you've talked about previously on how a younger population increases mobility. And so as India moves so rapidly from a primary to tertiary sector, leading to a mass rural-urban migration, while so many people do not have the know-how to adapt to the tertiary sector, what is India's answer to this problem?
Tertiary sector.
Yeah.
No, tertiary, right?
Tertiary sector.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with this rapid migration, what do you see could be India's solution to this problem, given that this leads to a lot of poverty in the urban areas as well, where there's a mass migration of people who are there but who don't know how to find a job or who can't find a job. And my second question...
The first question is about rural-urban migration and the poor moving into the cities and not being able to find jobs.
Yes.
Well, how do you handle that problem? Okay. Second one.
And the second question is, given India's international relations with countries, its neighbors such as Sri Lanka and Pakistan, you mentioned how you want to improve infrastructure in places such as Kashmir. How do you see this as a challenge to India's infrastructure and urbanization and growth?
Okay. The first question about rural-urban shift. The urbanization is taking place because of the opportunities in the urban sector. When I said that 60% of our GDP today is generated in our urban sector, in the next decade it will be 70%. Obviously, 70% in our calculations, new jobs will be in the urban sector. It's not that they are coming to the towns looking for jobs. They are able to find jobs. Now, another very important point, I don't want to go, it requires a lot of time to explain it, is India's non-sustainable agriculture. India has a very non-sustainable agricultural pattern with small land holdings. Our land holdings are 2 acres, 3 acres. We don't have the huge farms of the United States or the Western world of 10,000 acres. So it's non-sustainable. As a factory, as a farm grows, as a family grows, 2 sons become 4 sons and 5 dependents, 10 dependents on that same 2 acres of land, which is not sustainable. They have to move away to find an opportunity for themselves. So it's not that this is a question of a rural-poor divide. I think it's more an urban-rural divide where rural people from rural areas are coming to urban areas, looking and getting jobs there, which are not available in rural area. And this is where I said is the biggest challenge, because we have so many thousands of people moving every year. We had the Commonwealth Games, last year in India. 20,000 or 30,000 people came in, or 40,000 people, laborers came in from Bihar and from other parts. They've never gone. They came in to work and they've never gone because they get a job so easily. If you look for finding some of the skills in Delhi, there's a big shortage. So the challenge is, how do you create adequate urban infrastructure? We are not China, that we can restrict people from movement. People will move, and we have to face that reality. If people move, excuse me, how do we create enough urban infrastructure for them to live a sustainable life? Your next question, whether the neighborhood affects our infrastructure development programs? No. In Jammu and Kashmir, we are moving ahead, but it's very, very difficult territory and terrain. So we are not having any problem. In the Northeast, we are not having any problems. But again, the scale is so large. Today, in the Northeast, many of the districts and the large villages are not connected by roads. Whether it's Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, Mizoram, in our northeastern states. So it's not that neighbors are creating a problem. But, of course, India's neighborhood. India is in the midst of a very turbulent neighborhood. We have Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar. The very, difficult neighborhood, which is all going through various stages of transition.
Can I build on the last question and ask you, when do you see a breakthrough in relations between India and Pakistan? Will that happen in our lifetime?
Well, we've got to, I think Pakistan internally has to consolidate. Because if internally you cannot consolidate, you really cannot be trying to solve an external issue. Then Pakistan must decide once and for all that it will not be the global nursery of terrorism. Every act of terrorism has a made in Pakistan stamped on it. Why? So this is a problem. And it's been, now I don't think there's a matter of any doubt or research that which is the nursery of terrorism. Pakistan has demonstrated that it is the global nursery of terrorism. And this, Pakistan must decide themselves. And the faster they decide it, it's better for everybody.
Okay. I saw a gentleman over there, and then I'll come to you and you. Yeah.
Good evening. My question is this, the Mumbai-Pune Expressway is an excellent piece of work. And my question is this, why are other roads developments in India taking far so long to develop? And next question is, some of the private companies that are held, most of them do not have managing directors. They have only acting managing directors to run them. So in this point in time, you know, when we see taking so long, we wonder why the first piece of work was done fantastically and the next piece of work is taking ever so long.
You're talking in?
Bombay-Pune, why was the Bombay-Pune highway so successful, and why were the others not so successful, right?
Yeah. You know, there has been, it's not that it's not successful. In roads, there is a quantum jump of a program. Now, you just can't decide to build a road. You got to do the engineering of it. You got to do the project reports of it. You got to see, in India, you got to see how many rivers, major, minor, it goes through. The culverts, there's the engineering of a road, which takes 2.5, 3 years. I was road minister, and I used to be very impatient. And the consultancy, we used to tell the consultants that, why haven't you designed this road? What is wrong? Why is the delay? Then by the time you do the engineering, you can then only arrive at a total project cost. Then only you can put it for a bid. So the process takes long, but that's kicked in. That's kicked in now. And I think in the next 2 years, you're going to see a phenomenal growth rate in this. Because all the initial work has been done, identification. Which road do you want to build? India is so large. Where do you start? So we've identified what we wanted to do in the National Highway Development Program. That's moved forward. And the engineering is over. The bidding process is over, or the bidding process is on. After the bidding process, it takes at least 1 year before work can start on the ground.
Gentleman over there, then I'll come to you. Okay, please. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I'm a student of Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. It's a very short question to ask. You made a very interesting observation regarding that India has managed a very credible growth rate of 9%, which has been despite the government. Now, my question is, what kind of a growth rate do you reckon that we would be looking at if there was no despite the government?
No, I didn't say despite. You got me wrong. I never said. I said growth is taking place. Also, despite government, growth will continue. It's a good sign. But obviously, we can't say this 8 or 9% is despite the government. It's not the growth rate we achieve. We are heading towards growth in countries despite governments. That's happening everywhere. In Singapore, it's in large number of countries where growth is private sector driven, not public sector driven.
The second part is that, is there some way in which we can change this despite to respite from government?
Well, I wish, I agree with your wishful thinking, you know. I'm for it.
Will his wish come true?
Yeah, I hope it does. That's what efforts of the polity should be, of governance should all be. And that should be the direction. And it is by more structural changes. It's not merely policy changes. Policy changes is one part of it. Sometimes you may have a good policy, but a bad structure, So it's by structural changes of implementation and by policy, you can achieve it.
I thought the answer would be send more students to Lee Kuan Yew schools.
Yeah.
Please, yeah.
Hi, Mr. Nath. Thank you so much for taking the time to come here. I have 2 questions to ask you. One is, how will you incorporate sustainability and environmental targets throughout India's infrastructure and urbanization, the growth pattern going forward? And the next question is, how can SMEs, small and medium enterprises in India, take part in this, ride on this growth also? Thank you.
Your second question first, that SMEs are playing a very important role in India's growth, all ancillarization, whether it's an auto sector or in so many other manufacturing sectors, it's the small and medium enterprises, which besides government programs is also a big repository of our strengths of skills, even to remain competitive. Many large companies are outsourcing much of the manufacturing works to the small and medium sector for cost efficiency. Your other question on environmental concerns. Well, in our infrastructure growth, we are trying where the power sector, which is the biggest delinquent in this, is we are trying to balance out. We are now looking at nuclear power. We are looking at going up to 50,000 megawatts of nuclear power. We are looking at hydro stations. But again, hydro stations means large-scale acquisition of land, and sometimes forest land, sometimes land with a lot of biodiversity. It's not that it's not that in India we don't have hydro capacity. In India we have huge hydro capacity, but it would mean destruction of our forests, of our biodiversity. So that's another challenge. But where coal-fired is concerned, where our coal energy plants are concerned, fossil fuel power plants are concerned, more energy efficiency. We have built-in environmental concerns into our developmental process. When I was Environment Minister in 1991, we tried to build in, and which we have now, built-in environmental concerns in our developmental process. That's why you now read everywhere that so many coal mines can't start, so much this can't start, because of environmental concerns. We are environmentally conscious, but having said that, also let me tell you that India's per capita emissions are the lowest in the developing countries. And saying there will be no development is not the answer. The question is having the right kind of development. And that is what we are endeavoring to do.
Okay, why don't you come to the mic, the gentleman in pink shirt, and I come to you, because he's put up his hand earlier. Okay, 1, 2. Now I see the hands. Why is it the hands come up at the end always?
I am Benji from the other WTO. We are the World Toilet Organization. So this question I'm going to pose to Minister is the state of sanitation in India. I wonder whether that falls under your portfolio. We want to understand the state of sanitation in India because as an NGO, we intend to enter into India to run out some sanitation program with local partners. So one is the state of sanitation in India and which provinces are most in need of sanitation improvements and the right partners we should work with when we are in India to start this sanitation program. Thank you.
Well, Kishore, if I knew there'd be so many questions, I would have talked for longer. But sanitation. We have a huge sanitation problem. You have all the numbers on the net. If you talk about what is our disposals, what is sewage, it's disastrous. I don't even want to get into it. But in our urban renewal mission, which is the government of India's program to fund the states, sanitation is a very major component. And that is where I think you can participate. It's implemented by our states, funded by the central government. So sanitation forms a very important part. And one of the considerations for funding them is just not the program, is that they must carry out certain reforms. And one of these reforms are also in the sanitation front. So if you ask me where you should go, well, it's a difficult question to answer because I'll say where should you not go, right? That's it. So you can go anywhere. And again, you won't be able to deal with the scale of the problem.
That's true. Okay, over there. By the way, those who have questions, please go to the mics and then line up there. Maybe I can spot you because we only have 20 minutes to go. And as usual, there's something about a human capacity. The questions come at the end. Please, go ahead.
Minister Nath, I'm from the media section here. I'm a journalist, Jason Gale from Bloomberg News. And I have a question related to sanitation and water. In most India's urban areas, public water supply only runs for a couple of hours a day. And people routinely have to boil the water before they drink it. When do you envisage a water supply like we expect here in Singapore, for example, rolled out across India?
Please don't compare Singapore with India, you know, because again, it's a different scale. But in our drinking water programs, in our second phase of our urban renewal program, we are looking at PPP projects. We got one in Nagpur. The only PPP water project in India today is in Nagpur. We are looking at various models. We are looking at PPP, we are looking at government funded, but we must recognize this, that across India, water is considered to be for free. In my district, if you come to my district, if you say you're going to pay for water, you know, I can never say it, because water is meant to be for free. It's supposed to be a service government has got to provide. So one of our programs, reforms in our urban bodies, is that they must have revenues to at least meet their operation and maintenance. Which would mean what? Which would mean they would have to charge for water. There'll have to be a meter. And that is what is going to lead to it. We, I must say, are in a very, I'm talking across India, I'm not talking about Delhi, Mumbai, etc. Across India, we would, that is going to form a very important component of our second urban renewal program, which I believe will, in the next decade, solve this.
Great. Over there, then I'll come to you. Yeah, please.
Sir, this is Piyush. Basically, sir, in India, corruption is the buzzword, the hot word, corruption.
Sorry?
Corruption.
Corruption.
Yeah. So just I would like to ask, in your department and India infrastructure and urban project, how it affects and what are the challenges, and what is the main initiative you would like to take to eradicate the corruption in your department or in the in the common?
Well, corruption is a very major issue. It affects the lives of a very, very large number of people in India. There is no doubt about it. Now, corruption has to be addressed with the right laws. Now, laws itself will not solve the problem. You've got to have systemic issues. Systemic issues until systems are corrected. Laws is one part of it, an important part of it. So you got to frame the right laws. Number two, you got to have systemic corrections. There's just not corruption in one area. There's corruption across, and we all recognize it. And I don't think there's any point wanting to be ignorant of it. But then you're not addressing the issue. So all things have to be done simultaneously. Have the laws, strong laws. You know, we are debating a Lokpal bill. Now, how does the Lokpal bill affect the chap in my village? How will it affect him? How will it settle the corruption there from the block officers? How will it solve that? On the other hand, what are the systemic corrections we need to have? All these have to be taken. And, you know, in India, when we brought in the Right to Information Act, which was brought in by my government, was one of the steps towards it, you know, right to information, to be able to get to the bottom of things. Similarly, we need many more such laws, and we need to do systemic corrections.
Please.
My name is Kirtida, and the question that I want to pose is, you talked about land economics. Especially, I would like to focus on the urban economics part of it. There's a green component, urban greening, parks and public places, which are very, very important for cities to become better when you're planning 20, 30 years ahead. Where would the economics of greening, and at what level are you bringing this in about having certain green spaces, and how do you price them? How does this take place in India now, moving forward?
Well, let me tell you about our master plan, say a Delhi master plan. Now, there are green belts prescribed in the master plan. Okay, it's on the internet. There are areas prescribed for parks, for master plan. When I talk to land economics, it means how do you monetize land where there's already construction? Like, if you've got 3 floors, what is the value of allowing 6 floors? What should the government get? At the moment, there's no economics in this. What is the best monetization of land for the government to raise resources? We are building the metro. I'll give you the example of Delhi Metro. I was telling the Delhi Metro that all along your corridor, why do you build a station? Why don't you go higher? Monetize it. Build commercial space, build office space. Build a mall on top. Because the transport is right there. Build the facilities. So people get off their train, can go to work. But how do you monetize that? What's the value? FAR is creating land where there's no land. But certainly this cannot be. Town planning, city planning cannot be at the cost of our green spaces, cannot be at the cost. There has to be carrying capacity studies carried out locally so that we have parking, we have green spaces, we have everything. So those get all built in. So the concept of the master plan, like for example, I'm giving the Delhi example, has been this. Now we are going into amendments of the master plan, which is prescribed every 5 years. So it's got to be done next year. We are doing the study. And we are getting as much of public discourse on this as possible.
But you know what Singapore did was that the government acquired the land around the stations because the value immediately goes up, and then it sold the land to the private sector at a much higher value. Because when you put a station in there, the land value goes up immediately.
Well, what we are doing is that it's not possible to acquire the land, but we are allowing the Delhi Metro, which is a government, which is a partnership between the central government and the state government, which is government, to be able to do it, to fund their next phase.
Yes. Great. Gentleman up there, please. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm an undergraduate student from NTU, and I'm from Mumbai. I'm going to use an example to ask my question, and forgive me if it's long and a little provocative. But you mentioned the metro being built in Mumbai, and I'm sure you know about these skywalks that have already been built only last year.
Sorry, I can't hear you yet. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
What's that?
These skywalks.
Skywalks.
Yeah, that were built last year, and they disrupted daily life. So now these same structures are going to be destroyed to accommodate overhead metro tracks. So now my question to you is, how would you address this vacuum in coordination between different government organizations and agencies, which is absolutely required for sustainable, robust infrastructure growth? And B, in urban areas, this is my opinion, how can you use a top-down approach to build infrastructure around existing infrastructure which is not that great?
Like what do you mean? Build infrastructure around existing infrastructure?
Infrastructure that is not that great. How can you build an overhead metro over a 4-lane road? So, yeah, that's my question.
Okay. Well, I didn't get you're building a metro, overhead metro, over a 4-lane which is exceeded capacity. You have a metro going right across, and there's a 4-lane road below. You've got to have a 4-lane, that's the engineering of it. I couldn't tell you what the wisdom behind that is, but obviously there is some sense and some reason in it. When you talk about the skywalks, these skywalks, I read an article, I don't know whether it's correct or not, on the same issue which you're talking, these skywalks which were built, they were wrongly built to start with, rightly. You're saying this rightly, it was wrongly built to start with. They were planned many years before the metro was planned, but they came into being when the metro was designed. So there became a contradiction. When these skywalks were planned, there was no plan of the metro. Suddenly the metro arrived. Now the skywalks obviously is a wastage of public money in that context. Sometimes these contradictions happen, I must say this. Sometimes these contradictions happen, and it's one of the costs which have got to be paid. But there has to be better coordination, and that's happening. 4 years ago there was really, 5 years ago there was not much coordination, but now I think it's happening in the states. What you're talking about is in Maharashtra. And Maharashtra state is now, I think, getting its act together in having a single nodal planning agency.
Great. Is there anybody else? You're asking a second question. Anybody else got a first question to ask? If not, you.
Okay, he'll be the last to ask the second question.
Okay, sir. My other question to you is that since independence of our country, inflation has been a very familiar term.
What?
And inflation. And hyperinflation was also a phenomenon.
Yeah.
observed in the 1980s, and also inflation is relevant pretty much right now also. So do you think that India, which is associated with liberalization, should liberalize its agricultural sector and retail sector to take charge of its supply chain to reduce inflation instead of monetary tightening?
You mean retail?
Yeah.
Okay. Your question really, what you're trying to ask, is that should you liberalize retail? Should you allow foreign investment in retail?
Yeah.
Is that your question?
Yeah, and agriculture.
Pardon me?
Agriculture.
Agriculture, yeah, that's supply chain and agriculture, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let me put it this way. Inflation is external and internal. Now, crude oil prices, India imports over 83–84% of its crude oil. Crude oil is an external issue. Some of the commodity prices, take lentils. We import close to 60% of our lentils. Lentil prices have shot up. Inflation is not merely because of a breakdown in supply chain or a logistic issue. That's one of the issues. But internally, if we can manage our supply demand and our logistic issue, we have a great agricultural production, even this year. Our agricultural stocks are bursting at their seams. We have to import edible oils, lentils, and crude oil, which are the three big components. All these three are external factors. We can see the rise in prices, global prices in these three commodities. Where the question of supply chain is concerned, we do need to have a great supply, a logistic network, a supply chain. We are very weak at this. You know, I come from an area which produces the best oranges in the country. In case you don't know which orange it is, look it up. You'll find out the best orange comes from where I come. Now, every crop, there are huge supply distribution challenges. There are not enough wagons, there are not enough this. Take vegetables and fruits. India is the largest, the second largest or third largest producer of fruits and vegetables. 40% of our fruits and vegetables rot. 40%. India's fruits and vegetables rot because they don't reach the marketplace. This is again supply chain. Now, when you talk of foreign investment in retail, if that was your question, I, in my earlier job, looked at this very carefully, and it's not a question of foreign investment. It's big versus small, not foreign investment versus domestic investment. Big retailers versus small retailers. And I think that both can subsist together. That is my finding. So it's not a question you found Reliance getting into retail. Now, if Reliance gets into retail, why not somebody else, a global chain, gets into retail also? So it's big versus small, not foreign investment versus domestic investment.
Can I ask the last question? You know, in your remarks, you referred to the fact that, you know, people used to give advice to India, this is what you should be doing. And then after the financial crisis, you say, listen, maybe you should listen to us. As the dust is settling on the last financial crisis, and as you look back now on all the advice that India was given in the past of how you should develop, what do you think at the end of the day is the right mix of policies between the role of the government, the role of the private sector in development? What do you see as you know, the Washington consensus was get the government out of the way, private sector will do everything. Now they realize, even in Washington, D.C., you have to have a balance between the visible hand and the invisible hand to fix development. What's your sense now, today?
You know, in finance, in the banking and financial world, what was the Western model? Okay, if you really analyze it, the Western financial model was based on valuations. The valuations created the paper, and the paper created the liquidity. And that's how it moved. So when you had the subprime crisis, it was the valuations creating the paper, and the paper created the liquidity. When you never had the valuations, you don't have the paper, so there's no liquidity. Banks started going down. And this world of fantasy finance, absolute fantasy finance, which was there. I think that conservative, and I always say this, that some of the countries which weren't affected. Somebody asked me that why didn't India feel the effect of the financial crisis? And I jokingly answer that, Indian bankers did not know much English. All those bankers who spoke too much of English are in trouble, and those who spoke less English are not in trouble. You see Japan was not in trouble, France was not in trouble. So that was one of the things if you look across the world. So one of the reasons may be jokingly that bankers should not learn English. Okay. So that was one of them, that you got to have a banking system which is not built on valuations. One of the most important advice is that every country has to plan and recognize change. You are seeing demographics change. You are seeing demographics change where manufacturing economies are becoming service economies. And in India, we recognize this, and we still feel that our manufacturing sector must grow more. Our services sector to GDP has gone up. But we need to raise up our manufacturing sector. We've got to see even investment in services versus investment in manufacturing. We calibrate this, we keep monitoring this, exercise to keep monitoring this. So how much is your investment coming in the manufacturing sector and the services sector? How much is greenfield? It can't just be acquisitive, which is just acquiring, which is nothing to do with greenfield investment. So every country has to today look at the new architecture within and the new architecture outside. The world has to recognize that there is a China, the world is to recognize there is an India, and the world has to recognize that there will be many more smaller Chinas and many more smaller Indias in the making in the next decade.
Well, that's a good note to end on, because, your speech is talk about India as the most aspirational country and about the young, optimistic population you have. I think clearly you've communicated that optimism to us, and that's very, I'm sure, a wonderful thing to have as you leave this session. So thank you very much, Kamal, for all your sharing your time with us.